Across the sands of ancient Egypt, a healer named Kael-Horem uncovered something that was never meant for human hands. A fragment from the stars. A device pulsing with secrets older than history itself. What began as an act of compassion, saving his people from plague, would ignite suspicion, betrayal, and a legacy buried for millennia. Centuries later, Dr. Nora Selwyn will unearth the same relic. She will face the same question Kael-Horem once did. Is this seed a gift or a curse? This is the story of Imhotep's seed, and once you hear it, you will never look at the past or the future the same way again. Atun Basin, Earth, beneath the same sky that one day would point toward Captain's star, 12.8 light-years from home. The night air carried the scent of damp reeds and river silt. Stars blazed like cold embers above the Nile's broad floodplain, familiar to every farmer and fisherman of the Atun Basin. But tonight, the heavens broke their silence. A streak of fire tore across the firmament, brighter than the moon, louder than any storm. The ground shuddered. Flocks of birds erupted from the reeds. Kael-Horem lifted his head from the clay jar he was mending. The son of a humble craftsman, trained as both healer and builder, he had always trusted stone, water, and flesh to follow natural laws. But the sky's wound, blazing white, made him stumble to his knees. Villagers screamed prayers. Children clung to their mothers. Some called it the wrath of Aten, others the eye of a forgotten god. Horem did not join the panic. His heart raced, yes, but another current flowed through him. Curiosity. He felt the pull to understand, to measure what others feared. That, perhaps, was what set him apart. The object struck the desert ridge beyond the basin. A shock wave rolled, like thunder over water. When the dust began to settle, silence replaced fear. The villagers huddled in their huts. Horem alone walked toward the glow on the horizon. His sandals bit into cooling sand as he climbed the ridge. Each step brought heat against his skin and a faint, metallic tang in the air. The crater was shallow, rimmed with shards of fused earth that gleamed like glass. At its heart lay not stone, but something smoother, something alive with faint light. A curved fragment of metal, dark as obsidian yet glinting with blue veins, pulsed softly as if breathing. When Horem drew near, the hairs on his arms rose. The thing hummed, a whisper below hearing. He extended his hand, half in fear, half in awe. The instant his fingers brushed its surface, a tingle ran through his skin. Not burning, not cutting. A spark, like the life of a fish writhing in his grasp. He snatched his hand back, gasping, then trembling, touched it again. The same spark, the same current. This is not stone, he whispered to himself. Not fire from the sky, something else. Behind him, voices echoed up the ridge. A group of men carrying torches had followed, too afraid to approach the crater but unwilling to let him face it alone. "What is it, Kael-Horem?" one of them called. "Is it cursed?" another asked. He swallowed, staring at the glowing veins. "It breathes," he said, "but it is no curse." The men hesitated, shifting uneasily. They would not come closer. Their torches cast long shadows, leaving Horem alone in the pale blue shimmer. He wrapped the fragment in linen and lifted it into his arms. It was heavier than stone, heavier than any tool he had carried, yet balanced, as though it wanted to be born. He felt its faint pulse through the cloth. A rhythm, a signal. As he descended, villagers parted in silence. Mothers clutched children tighter. Old men bowed their heads, unwilling to meet his gaze. To them, the object was dangerous. To him, it was a question waiting for an answer. Kael-Horem paused at the river's edge, the seed's glow seeping through its wrappings. He glanced at the water, at the stars mirrored upon it, and then at his trembling hands. A healer's hands, a builder's hands. now holding something that felt as if it had come not only from the heavens, but from minds beyond earth. He knew in that moment his life would change. Curiosity would not let him bury it. Faith would not let him destroy it. Fear would not let him speak of it freely. The choice to keep it, to study it in secret, was both his first betrayal and his first step toward destiny. The seed pulsed once, more, stronger this time, like a heart sinking with his own. Kael-Horem hid the object beneath his reed mat, away from the eyes of neighbors and priests. Days passed, but the memory of its pulse would not leave his thoughts. At night he lay awake, hearing the hum inside his skull. He was a man of craft, of mortar and herbs, not of omens. Yet the seed whispered to him in silence, demanding to be understood. By the light of an oil lamp, he unwrapped it. The fragment no longer burned with the fury of the sky, but glowed with a steady inner vein of blue. He set it on clay jars filled with water, watching ripples dance as if touched by invisible fingers. When he pressed copper wires, drawn from his small supply of tools, against its surface, sparks leapt faintly, crawling across the metal. He frowned. "It carries breath," he murmured, "but not the breath of men." His healer's instinct awoke. He dipped his fingers in the water and touched the seed again. The faint current ran through him, sharper this time, enough to tighten his muscles before fading. It did not burn. Instead, it felt cleansing, as though the body itself had been reminded of some hidden rhythm. Experiment followed experiment. Damp cloth draped across the seed grew warm. Seeds of barley, when placed near it, sprouted faster than those in ordinary soil. He charted the changes on shards of pottery, scratching lines like a scribe recording the Nile's floods. Still, fear pressed in. If the Council of Aten knew, they would call it heresy. Yet if he did nothing, the gift would wither in secrecy. Kael-Horem sat in the shadows, the glow reflecting in his weary eyes. He was a healer, sworn to protect life. The seed, alien as it might be more than a stone. It might be a tool or a promise. And though doubt gnawed at him, curiosity was stronger. For the first time in his life, Kael-Horem felt that knowledge itself might become both his salvation and his undoing. The rains failed that season, and with the stagnant pools came sickness. At first it was whispers, children coughing, elders complaining of fever. Then it spread. Skin broke in sores, breaths grew shallow. The fields of barley stood untended as whole families collapsed inside mud brick homes. Kael-Horem walked among them carrying his pouch of herbs, but the old remedies, garlic, honey, crushed willow, did little. He pressed damp cloths to burning, foreheads, whispered prayers, and watched lives fade all the same. For a healer, nothing was worse than helplessness. One night a father begged him, clutching a feverish boy. "Save him, Kael-Horem! By the gods, save him!" The words cut deep. In his hut, by the flicker of the lamp, he unwrapped the forbidden fragment, the Imhotep's seed. It glowed softly, as though waiting for him. His heart pounded. The Council of Aten would condemn this. Yet what was a healer if he let children die in silence? He placed the seed near a clay bowl of water, then dipped strips of linen. The fabric tingled in his hands, alive with faint current. He pressed it gently across the boy's chest. The child gasped, muscles stiffening, then shuddered into stillness. The father cried out in horror, until moments later the boy inhaled sharply, eyes fluttering open. Color returned to his cheeks as though fever's grip had loosened. Kael-Horem staggered back, trembling. He had expected failure, maybe death. Instead, he had seen life returned. Word spread quickly. Mothers brought infants. Farmers carried their wives. He warned them, "This is no miracle, only trial." But desperation silenced caution. One by one he laid the charged cloths, watched spasms pass, and saw patients breathe easier. Not all survived, but enough did to turn fear into hope. Crowds knelt before him, whispering that Aten himself had touched his hands. They pressed gifts of bread and fish at his feet. Kael-Horem felt none of their joy. He only felt the weight of the seed in his satchel, heavier than stone, heavier than truth. Alone that night, he stared at the object glowing against the dark. What had he unleashed? Was it healing, or a chain binding him to forces he did not understand? Still, when he closed his eyes, he saw the boy's breath returning, and for that alone, he could not turn back. The Paratun Basin no longer echoed with wails of mourning, but with songs of gratitude. Families hung garlands on Kael-Horem's doorway. Children ran to touch the hem of his robe, whispering that he carried the light of Aten. Farmers left baskets of dates and fish, refusing payment for his labor. To them, he was no longer just a healer. He was a vessel chosen by the heavens. Kael-Horem accepted their thanks with bowed head, but unease coiled in his chest. Every gift, every chant drew more eyes, and not all eyes were kind. At the edge of the crowd, robed envoys of the Council of Aten stood in silence. Their gazes were sharp, weighing each miracle with suspicion. One approached him at dusk, voice low and edged with warning. "You heal with power not granted by our gods." "Where did you learn this?" Kael-Horem's mouth was dry. "I use what the earth provides, nothing more." The envoy's stare lingered on the satchel at his side, where the seed pulsed faintly through layers of linen. He did not press further, but his silence spoke louder than accusation. That night, Kael-Horem sat by the river, watching torchlight flicker across temple walls in the distance. The people's gratitude filled his heart, yet the council's shadow pressed heavier with each passing hour. He knew it would not be long before questions turned to commands. The seed glowed softly in his lap, a gift to heal, or a curse that might soon draw the wrath of power. Summoned at dawn, Kael-Horem entered the stone hall of the Council of Aten. Incense curled from bronze braziers, heavy with the scent of judgment. The elders sat in a semicircle, their eyes fixed on him as though he were a criminal, not a healer. "You claim to cure the plague," the high elder intoned. "Yet you speak not of the source of your power. Are you prophet or sorcerer?" Kael-Horem bowed, his palms damp. "I am neither. I serve the people with what tools I know." "Tools?" another scoffed. "Or forbidden relics? The people call you chosen. That title belongs only to Aten. Do not mistake their gratitude for divine blessing." The words cut deep. He longed to reveal the truth, that the seed pulsed with life not of gods but of stars. Yet to speak it would be to condemn himself. "I heal because it is my duty," he said quietly. "No more." The elders whispered among themselves. One lifted a hand. "We will watch you, Kael-Horem, closely." Dismissed, he stepped into the sunlight. Behind him, the chants of the people rose again, calling his name with reverence. But inside the temple walls, suspicion had taken root. He looked down at the satchel hidden beneath his robe. The seed throbbed once, as if sensing the tension. For the first time, Kael-Horem felt not only the burden of healing, but the shadow of power closing around him. Luxara site, Earth, where desert winds sweep over ruins that once whispered to the Nile. Captain's star, 12.8 light-years away, will soon cast its shadow here. Dr. Nora Selwyn stood beneath the glare of halogen lamps strung across the excavation pit. Dust curled in the beams, carried by the desert night. The Luxara site was nothing like the polished labs of the Global Bio Consortium. Here, fragments of pottery and fractured pillars spoke a language she never cared to learn. History was for poets and archaeologists. She was a scientist of cells, a master of genomes. The past, in her eyes, was a distraction. Yet tonight, the past had been delivered to her hands. The crate arrived under military escort, its sides stamped with both the GBC insignia and the seal of Egypt's Antiquities Office. Nora signed papers. She didn't read, then pulled the lid free. Inside, cushioned in foam, lay a dark object the size of her palm. Smooth, metallic, veins faintly visible beneath the surface. The dig team murmured about its legend. "A stone fallen from the heavens," one archaeologist whispered. Another claimed villagers still called it cursed. Nora shut their voices out. She lifted the fragment with gloved hands. Heavy, too heavy for its size, and warm, though it had been buried in sand for millennia. A technician stepped closer. "Dr. Selwyn? Is that really the artifact they're calling the Imhotep seed?" Nora glanced at him, her expression flat. "Call it whatever you like. It's a specimen, nothing more." But even as she spoke, she felt something beneath. The glove, a faint vibration, a rhythm not unlike a heartbeat. She stilled, pulse quickening. Rational thought told her it was residual heat, maybe an internal lattice settling after years underground. Yet a whisper in her mind insisted otherwise. She sealed it in a sterile container, ignoring the stares of the excavation crew. To them, it was sacred, perhaps dangerous. To her, it was data, patterns waiting to be mapped. And still, as she walked, the narrow corridors of the makeshift lab, the container humming faintly against her palm, she found herself unsettled. The seed seemed less like an artifact and more like a presence. For the first time in years, Nora felt a tremor of doubt in her conviction that science stripped mystery from all things. She told herself she was imagining it. Just heat, just weight, just stone. But when she placed the container beneath the lab's scanner, the glow of its veins pulsed once, synchronized, as if acknowledging her touch. Nora drew a breath, steadying her voice. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding." She didn't yet know that by opening the seed, she was opening a door between centuries, between her hands and Kael-Horem's. The sterile hum of the Luxara site's temporary lab filled Dr. Nora Selwyn's ears as she slid the container into the magnetic cradle. She tightened her ponytail, pulled the console closer, and activated the array of imaging instruments. The seed sat under the scanner's light like an unblinking eye. Its surface reflected nothing. Instead, it seemed to swallow the beam and answer with its own faint glow. On the console, an artificial voice came online. "GBC analysis unit ready. Parameters?" Nora adjusted the focus. "Full spectrum scan. Thermal, lattice, conductivity, everything." A pause. "Confirmed." Lines of data spilled across her screen. Conductivity spikes that no alloy on Earth should produce. Thermal gradients forming without external input. And deeper still, patterns emerging in the crystalline veins that ran through its core. She leaned closer. "That's not random." The AI's voice was calm, clinical. "Spectral mapping reveals repeating geometries. Probability of artificial encoding, 84%. Encoding." She bit her lip. The seed wasn't just metal. It was a medium. A lattice holding memory. She switched to quantum tomography. The scanner peeled away layers atom by atom, like peeling skin from fruit. Beneath the metallic crust lay a crystalline matrix, angled planes intersecting in perfect symmetry. She watched them rearrange as the AI processed the signal. "This structure stores information by strain deformation," the system explained. "Micro stresses in the lattice alter electron flow, functioning as logic states. Estimated capacity, billions of petabytes." Her breath caught. "Billions, not a relic, not a weapon, a library." She whispered, "Stellar lattice core." The name surfaced unbidden. It fit. On the monitor, the AI ran pattern recognition. Bits of signal reconstructed into spectral bars, then into faint geometric symbols, triangles within circles, arcs that suggested orbits. Nora's fingers hovered over the keyboard, almost trembling. For the first time in her career, she felt small. Not because of ignorance, but because the object in front of her carried a design language beyond human invention. This wasn't carved by hand or forged in fire. It was engineered with physics as its alphabet. The AI chimed again. Preliminary. Models suggest external referencing. Alignment resembles stellar cartography. Nora sat back in her chair. Cartography, a map inside a crystal. The seed wasn't just storing energy. It was pointing somewhere. Her pulse quickened, a faint echo of fear tugging at the edges of her certainty. She had built her reputation on dismissing myth, on grounding everything in synthetic genomes and controlled trials. But the longer she stared at the shimmering veins of the seed, the harder it became to pretend this was simply data. It was intention. Someone, or something, had wanted this to be found. Nora closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. When she opened them again, resolve hardened in her voice. "All right," she told the AI. "Let's follow the trail." And with that, she gave the command to push deeper into the lattice, unknowingly stepping onto the same path Kael-Horem had begun millennia earlier. The lattice sang. Not with sound, but with shifting light across Nora's monitors, veins of information untangling themselves under the AI's relentless parsing. Hours blurred. The desert outside Luxara site darkened, then glowed again with dawn, yet Nora hardly noticed. Her world had narrowed to the pulse of the Imhotep's seed and the lines of code blooming across her screen. Cross-referencing complete, the AI intoned. Anomalous symbols resolved into positional markers. Probability 97%. Positional for what? Nora muttered. The display transformed. What began as scattered triangles aligned into a star-field projection. Points of light hovered in the lab's hollow tank, suspended above the console like a miniature sky. The system marked one point in blue, Earth. Another glowed red at the edge of the map. The AI drew a line between them, annotated with numbers Nora recognized instantly. Distance, velocity, relative drift. Target system identified, the voice said. Captain Star. Distance, 12.8 light-years. Nora's throat tightened. She had studied distant exoplanets out of professional necessity, scanning them for biosignatures. Captain Star was old, nearly 11 billion years, orbiting closer to the galactic core than Sul, an unlikely neighbor. Yet here it was, encoded in a crystal buried beneath Egyptian sands. She whispered, almost to herself, "Someone left this for us." The AI replied without inflection. Data indicates trajectory from Captain Star toward Earth approximately 4 millennia ago. Confidence level, 89%. 4 millennia. Her pulse hammered. That was the age of the artifact's burial. The time of Kael-Horem. She steadied her breath, but awe broke through her usually cold exterior. For years she had built her identity on precision, on stripping mystery from biology. But now she was staring at evidence that humanity was not alone. That someone had not only existed light years away, but reached across the void to leave a marker here, in her hands. The map zoomed in. The seed was feeding the AI more. Orbital patterns, gravitational metrics. It was more than a destination. It was instructions. Her hands hovered over the console. Is it an invitation? Silence. Then the AI with chilling neutrality. Insufficient. Data! However, Vector suggests intentional communication rather than random drift. Nora pressed her palms together, exhaling sharply. Her colleagues at the GBC would seize this. The Orion Directorate would weaponize it. But to her, in this fragile moment, It wasn't about politics or control. It was about connection. Across the stars, across centuries, Kael-Horem had once touched this same seed. Now she was unraveling its voice. Her reflection wavered in the glass of the containment unit. For the first time, she didn't see the detached scientist who kept emotion locked away. She saw someone trembling at the edge of a discovery vast enough to change the trajectory of human history. She whispered, voice breaking, "Captain's star." The map's red marker pulsed once, twice, in rhythm with the seed itself, as if confirming her words. Nora leaned closer to the console, unable to look away. The past and the future had just converged, and she realized, with startling clarity, that from this moment onward, her life would no longer belong solely to science. It would belong to the story of contact. The discovery did not stay quiet for long. Data packets were mirrored automatically into the Global Bioconsortium's network, and within hours the news had reached Geneva headquarters. Dr. Nora Selwyn's console lit up with encrypted directives. Meetings scheduled, clearances revoked. The sterile calm of her lab fractured under the weight of politics. A call came through, the GBC emblem flickering against her screen. The face of Director Hahn appeared, voice sharp. "Dr. Selwyn, you are to classify your findings. Effective. Immediately. No disclosure beyond consortium channels." Nora straightened. "This is not just a sample. It's a message. The world deserves to—" Hahn cut her off. "The world deserves stability, not panic. Do your job. Keep quiet." The feed went dark before she could answer. She removed her glasses, pressing her fingers against her temples. The lab's silence felt suffocating. But before she could regain composure, another alert blinked red, an unsanctioned intrusion. Lines of code rushed across the screen. Someone else was listening. The Orion Directorate. Their message was more direct, almost taunting. "Artifacts of this scale are defense assets. Cooperate, and your career advances. Resist, and you will be erased." Her stomach nodded. Two powers pulling from opposite ends. One demanded silence, the other threatened control. Neither cared about truth. She turned to the seed resting under glass. Its veins pulsed faintly, indifferent to human greed. In its rhythm, she felt something steadier than fear, responsibility. Nora whispered to herself, "This isn't theirs. It isn't mine. It belongs to the story of who we are." Her voice trembled, but conviction grew beneath it. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking like a researcher protecting reputation. She was thinking like Kael-Horem once had, caught between power and the duty to heal. And just as he had chosen, she knew she would have to risk everything to follow what was right. The lab's fluorescent lights flickered as Nora forced herself back to the console. The directives from Geneva and the threats from the Orion Directorate still rang in her ears, but she pushed them aside. She needed clarity, answers. The seed hadn't traveled 12 light years just to be buried under bureaucracy. She ran the next dataset, shifting from stellar cartography to biosignature analysis. The lattice responded instantly, unraveling streams of encoded molecular patterns. At first, they looked like noise, fractals of energy states with no order. But then the AI spoke. Pattern alignment detected, cross-referencing with medical archives. Nora leaned closer, heart hammering. "Show me." The screen filled with double helix sequences, protein markers, immune responses, ancient and incomplete, but unmistakable. Data reconstructed from bodies that had lived and died thousands of years ago. The AI confirmed with chilling calm. Pathogen strain matches recorded traces from Paratune Basin remains. Estimated temporal origin, approximately 4,000 years. Nora froze. 4,000 years, the very age of the seed's burial. She whispered, "Kael-Horem," though she had never spoken his name before. Somehow she felt him then, His struggle against plague, his desperate decision to use the same fragment now pulsing under her lens. The implications struck like a wave. This artifact hadn't simply carried a map to Kaptein's star. It carried medical data. It remembered disease. It remembered the cure. The seed wasn't just a message from the stars. It was a bridge between two healers, separated by millennia. Nora gripped the console, breath unsteady. If she published this, governments would silence her. If she hid it, millions might be denied salvation. The seed pulsed again, steady and insistent, as if urging her forward. For the first time, Nora felt the weight Kael-Horem must have felt. The burden of holding life and danger in the same hand, and she realized she was no longer just deciphering history. She was stepping into it. Paratune Basin, Earth, where the Nile's waters once carved a life into the desert. Kaptein's star, 12-8. Light years away, remained unseen, but its echo pulsed in Kael-Horem's hands. The sickness had not vanished. It lingered like smoke, rising from huts where fever burned and children coughed through the night. But Kael-Horem no longer faced it with only herbs and prayer. He had the seed, and with it, a new way of thinking. By day, he walked from house to house carrying jars of water touched by the Imhotep's seed. When cloth steeped in that water was pressed to a patient's skin, the sores eased faster. Wounds closed with less rot. By night, he devised crude instruments of copper and clay, crude channels to conduct the seed's faint current into poultices and bandages. What once had been guesswork became method. Neighbors began to notice. A child who should have died sat up the next morning. A farmer's wife walked again, after weeks of weakness. Each success emboldened Kael-Horem. Each life saved convinced. Him the seed was more than chance. It was knowledge written in a language he had only begun to read. He trained young apprentices to boil water before applying it, to scrape metal tools clean with sand, to repeat his steps with care. Not magic, he told them, voice firm. Discipline, order. If you follow the rules, life returns. One apprentice asked timidly, "Then is it Aten's gift?" Kael-Horem hesitated. The people wanted a god behind his work, but when he looked down at the glowing fragment, he saw not divinity, but design. Still, he softened his words. It is a gift of the heavens, but it requires hands willing to learn. Soon, families from beyond the basin came seeking him. They brought offerings, grain, fish, copper rings, begging him to treat their sick. He had no temple, no throne, yet his courtyard filled like a sanctuary, and with every patient who breathed easier, Kael-Horem felt himself change. No longer just a craftsman's son, no longer a healer fumbling in darkness. He was becoming something else. A man who had glimpsed a path beyond his own age. Yet in quiet moments, staring at the seed's steady pulse, doubt stirred. If knowledge could save, it could also disrupt. The Council of Aten would not ignore what was happening in the Paratune Basin. Still, he pressed forward. To turn away would be to let the sickness win. And Kael-Horem was no longer a man who bowed. To inevitability, the river carried more than water that season. It carried stories. Traders leaving the Paratune Basin spoke of a healer whose hands glowed with the favor of heaven. They told of children rising from fever, of crops treated with his strange waters growing stronger than the fields around them. Word spread faster. Then the Nile's flood, traveling from village to village until even the city priests heard whispers of Kael-Horem's name. Families began to journey for days to reach his courtyard. Some brought goats as offerings, others carried their sick on woven mats. They called him the Chosen of Aten, a title he never claimed yet could not silence. At first, Kael-Horem welcomed the chance to heal beyond his village. Each new patient, was a challenge, each recovery proof that knowledge could defy despair. But with every success, the weight grew heavier. He saw the way men bowed too deeply, the way women pressed their infants into his arms as though he were divine. Their gratitude was a blessing and a warning. Because in the city of stone temples, the Council of Aten watched with unease. Reports reached them of villagers turning to a man instead of priests, of offerings left at his door instead of at the altars. His cures were said to be swifter than prayers, his touch more powerful than ritual. One evening, as Kael-Horem returned from the river, a messenger cloaked in white approached. The man's words were soft but edged with threat. "The council has heard of your works. Be cautious, healer. When faith bends too far toward a man, gods grow jealous." Kael-Horem lowered his gaze, offering no reply. But as the messenger's footsteps faded, he clenched his fists. He had never sought worship. He had only sought to save lives. And yet, he could feel it. The light of his reputation burning brighter than he wished, casting shadows where power resided. Shadows that were already reaching for him. The summer heat pressed down on the Paratune Basin, heavy and suffocating. Yet it was not the sun that dimmed Kael-Horem's spirit. It was the silence in the air, the way neighbors' voices dropped when he passed. Fame had once felt like gratitude. Now it felt like a rope tightening around his neck. He should have seen it sooner. The Council of Aten would not tolerate a rival. It began with small things. A messenger delayed with summons, a patient who arrived too late because temple guards turned him back. Then came the whispers, that Kael-Horem's cures were sorcery, that he consorted with powers outside the gods. One night he returned to his home and found the doorway open. His younger brother Sabu sat on the floor, blood seeping from a gash at his side. The boy's eyes fluttered, fear wide in his gaze. "They came, searching for your stone," Sabu rasped. "I told them nothing." Kael-Horem knelt, pressing cloth to the wound, but he knew. The cut was deliberate, meant not to kill quickly but to wound, to send a message. His hands shook as he bound the gash, whispering comfort, rage burning beneath each word. The seed pulsed faintly in its hiding place, as if listening. He hated its glow in that moment. It had given him power, yes, but also painted a target on everyone he loved. Days later, a summons arrived. Kael-Horem was called to the city temple. Against his better judgment, he went. Guards escorted him through towering columns, their eyes cold, their hands near their spears. The high chamber smelled of incense and stone dust. Counselors lined the dais, their expressions carved in disdain. "You heal with unnatural means," one intoned. "You steal devotion from Aten," another accused. "And your name spreads farther than the prayers of priests," the high elder said, his voice sharp as flint. Kael-Horem bowed low, forcing calm. "I heal because sickness devours our people. The seed is no curse, it is knowledge, and knowledge is not blasphemy." His words fell into silence. Then the high elder leaned forward. "Knowledge that does not pass through the gods belongs to no man. Already blood has been spilled because of you. Will you deny that?" The image of Sabu's wound flashed in Kael-Horem's mind. He clenched his jaw. He could not deny it. When he left the temple, torches flickered in alleys. He felt the city's gaze on him, sharper than knives. That night, his home was broken into again. Not for him, but for the seed. They ransacked baskets, shattered jars. His mother's keepsakes were trampled, his brother beaten once more. And then the final blow. His wife Asha, who had stood at his side through every cure, was seized by guards for questioning. She did not return. Kael-Horem staggered beneath the weight of it all. Healing had brought hope to thousands, yet cost him everything he cherished. The council had turned his gift into a weapon against him. Standing alone by the riverbank, he clutched the seed. its glow reflecting in his tears. For the first time he cursed it, not for what it was, but for what men would do to possess it. The betrayal was complete. The price had been blood, and Kael-Horem realized that if he wanted to protect the future, he could no longer cling to the present. The night air over the Paratun Basin was heavy with dust and grief. Kael-Horem stood alone at the edge of the desert, the Imhotep's seed wrapped tightly in linen, glowing faintly against his chest. Behind him, the village lay restless, murmurs of fear, soldiers' boots echoing through narrow alleys. He knew the Council of Aten would strike again. They would never stop until the seed was theirs. He looked down at his hands, scarred from years of work as a craftsman, stained from healing the sick. Hands that had once been enough. Now they trembled, not from weakness, but from knowing he held something far greater than he was ever meant to carry. Sabu limped to him, the wound still fresh on his side. "Brother, they will take it. They will take you." Kael-Horem placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. "Then it must disappear. Better the seed be hidden than twisted into chains." He walked into the desert, torchlight dancing across. Dunes. Each step felt heavier, as if the seed itself resisted. At last, he knelt near a weathered obelisk, toppled by time. With a shard of copper, he dug into the sand and stone until a hollow formed. Carefully, reverently, he lowered the seed. Inside. Its glow painted his face blue, a last heartbeat before vanishing beneath earth. He covered it with stones, pressing his palm against the mound. "You are not mine to wield," he whispered. "You are theirs to find when they are ready." The torch guttered in the wind. Kael-Horem rose, the burden lifted yet replaced by another. Loss. Without the seed, he was only a man again. Vulnerable. Exposed. But as he turned back toward the basin, he felt a strange calm. He had buried not just a fragment of metal, but a promise. That one day, someone beyond his age would uncover it and understand. And though he walked back into danger, Kael-Horem knew he had safeguarded hope. At dawn, the soldiers came. Their bronze spears glinted red in the rising sun as they marched through the Paratun Basin. Villagers scattered, whispering Kael-Horem's name with fear and reverence. He did not run. He stood in the open, robes dusty, hands empty. The seed lay buried deep beneath stone and sand, far beyond their reach. The captain of the guard shoved him to his knees. "Where is the relic?" Kael-Horem met his gaze without flinching. "Gone. It will never be yours." The blow came swift, a staff across his back, chains clamping his wrists. The Council of Aten had its prize, though it was only him. They dragged him toward the city, his brother shouting in protest until silenced with fists. In the judgment hall, incense masked the stench of power. The elders declared him heretic, thief of divine light, corrupter of faith. His sentence was exile, to the quarries, hard labor until his body broke. Yet as the words rang out, Kael-Horem felt no despair. The seed was safe. The knowledge would survive, hidden in the earth until another age. He thought of the children who had risen from sickness, of the lives saved. That was the legacy worth carrying, not chains or titles. As guards led him away, villagers bowed in silence. To them, he was fallen. To him, he was free, because hope was no longer in his hands. It was in the future, Luxara site, Earth, where excavation dust hides the echo of lives long gone. Beyond, Captain's star, 12.8 light-years away, remains silent, yet its fingerprints pulse within the Imhotep's seed. Dr. Nora Selwyn sat alone in the sealed chamber, the air filtered, the lighting dimmed to protect fragile samples. The seed rested inside its containment cradle, veins glowing faint blue as though aware of what she was about to attempt. Her fingers hovered above the console, hesitant, not from lack of skill, but from the weight of history pressing against her chest. She had spent days extracting fragments of genetic codes from the stellar lattice core. The AI had helped untangle them into strings that resembled viral sequences. At first she thought it was coincidence. Then the alignment grew undeniable. These were not random molecular scraps. They were records, meticulously stored, preserved across 4 millennia. She whispered to herself, "We're not looking at myth. We're looking at memory." Activating the bioprinter, she loaded the reconstructed sequences into a controlled environment, microspheres of protein and nanogel suspended in sterile solution. On the monitor, the first strands folded, proteins snapping into shape like forgotten words reassembled. Slowly, the virus rebuilt itself, not in lethal form, but as a digital twin, an echo contained within glass and circuits. The AI confirmed. Sequence stability, 93%. Estimated pathogenicity matches samples recovered from Peratun. Base and skeletal remains. Nora leaned closer, eyes sharp. So it's real. The plague Kael-Horem fought. This is it. For hours, she tracked replication cycles, watching cellular models respond, fever cascades, organ stress. Every detail matched what archaeologists had hinted at through bones and lesions. But now it wasn't guesswork. It was alive, in code and cell, under her gaze. A colleague from the GBC had once said she was incapable of emotion, that to her every discovery was just another data set. Yet here, staring at an illness resurrected from the age of pyramids, Nora felt something raw, a shiver of awe, a tremor of fear, and unexpectedly, empathy for the man who had once held this seed in his rough hands, desperate to save his people. She saw him in her mind, Kael-Horem, healer and outcast, pressing glowing cloth to burning skin, never knowing the word virus, yet understanding enough to fight. Across centuries, their work aligned. One had lived it. The other was resurrecting it. The AI chimed again. Model simulation available. Would you like to run therapeutic counter-response? Nora's throat tightened. This was the moment where analysis became intervention. She steadied her voice. Yes. Show me what he might have seen. On screen, microcurrents surged through. The model. The same subtle pulses Kael-Horem had once delivered with damp linen and copper wire. Viral load decreased. Cells stabilized. The data was clear. The seed hadn't been designed to spread death. It had been designed to remember life, to record it, to offer tools for survival. Nora sat back, stunned. The implications stretched far beyond archaeology. The seed wasn't an artifact of worship, nor a weapon. It was an archive, a medical record, spanning worlds, a gift meant to outlive empires. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the monitor's glass. For the first time, she didn't see the cold scientist, driven only by precision. She saw someone standing in the same lineage as Kael-Horem, burdened, but not alone. She whispered, almost reverently, "You tried to save them. Now it's my turn." The seed pulsed once, faint but deliberate, as though acknowledging her vow. Nora exhaled and straightened. There would be pressure, opposition, even danger. But the work had begun, and she would not stop, because the past had just proven itself more alive than the present. The lab's hum was steady, but inside Dr. Nora Selwyn's chest, her heartbeat raced. The reconstructed plague hovered in containment, obedient to her controls. Yet the more she studied the Imhotep's seed, the more she realized this was only the beginning. She fed the stellar lattice core new prompts, searching not for pathogens, but for patterns. The AI unraveled layer after layer, translating molecular inscriptions into cascading visualizations. Suddenly, her screens lit with a web of interlinked Sequences, each marked with timestamps thousands of years old. Cross-domain correlation detected, the AI intoned. Data includes not only pathogenic agents, but environmental genomes, soil bacteria, crop strains, insect vectors. Nora leaned forward. It wasn't recording a single plague. It was recording everything. The models confirmed her suspicion. The seed had captured a snapshot of the biosphere, an entire ecosystem preserved in molecular code. It was not a sword, it was a notebook. A chronicle of Earth's living system as observed millennia ago. Her mind spun with implications. This device was not designed to unleash chaos. It was designed to watch, to record, to remember. The seed was an observer, a silent witness dropped by hands that had studied life across light years. She whispered, half in awe, "It's a census of existence." The AI responded, calm as always. Archive function probability, 99%. Weaponization probability, less than 1%. Her chest loosened. Relief washed over her, mingled with wonder. The Council of Aten had feared sorcery. The GBC demanded classification. The Orion Directorate whispered threats of bioweapons. But the truth was different, almost gentle. The seed had been placed here not to destroy, but to safeguard memory, to ensure that even if famine or plague struck, life would not vanish without record. Nora turned in her chair, staring at the seed glowing in its cradle. Its pulse no longer felt alien. It felt patient, as though it had waited all these centuries, for her to see it clearly. Her thoughts drifted to Kael-Horem. He had never known the word genome. He had never seen data streams or molecular models. Yet somehow, instinctively, he had understood the seed's essence, a tool not for conquest, but for healing. She imagined him kneeling in firelight, pressing its power into the wounds of his people, unaware that he was part of a chain stretching to her own hands now. A knock on the glass startled her. Dr. Imani, one of her colleagues, had been watching through the observation bay. Nora keyed the intercom. "You've been at this for 36 hours straight," Imani said, her voice tight. "What are you seeing?" Nora hesitated. She should lie. She should protect the discovery, but exhaustion loosened her guard. "It's not a weapon, it's a recorder, an archive of life as it was." Imani blinked, astonished. "Then it's priceless." "Or dangerous," Nora countered. "Because someone will try to twist it into something it was never meant to be." Their eyes held across the glass, two scientists caught between awe and fear. Nora realized that in speaking the truth, she was stepping beyond the cold, guarded persona she had built her career on. She wasn't just parsing data anymore. She was protecting meaning. She turned back to the seed, whispering as much to herself as to the silent device. "You weren't meant to kill. You were meant to remember." The pulse inside the crystal brightened faintly, as though agreeing. For the first time, Nora felt not only curiosity, but kinship. She was no longer decoding data. She was listening to a witness from the stars. And she knew, if others learned this truth, they might still try to chain it. But she would stand in its defense, as Kael-Horem once had. The desert night wrapped Luxera site in stillness, the excavation tents glowing faintly under artificial light. Within the subterranean lab, Dr. Nora Selwyn studied her notes, eyelids heavy from exhaustion, but her mind refusing to rest. The seed lay in its containment cradle, pulsing like a heartbeat, its glow the only constant in a sea of shifting fear. She had proven the truth. It was an archive, not a weapon. Yet she knew truth alone would never protect it. And she was right. The first sign was silence. The low hum of the ventilation shifted, replaced by a subtle click of relays rerouted. Then came the flicker, lights dimming, cameras looping. Nora's console froze mid-simulation. She frowned, tapped the screen. Nothing. A whisper of static filled the comm system. Then a voice, calm, cold, unmistakable. Dr. Selwyn, remain where you are. The seed now belongs to the Orion Directorate. Her pulse spiked. She lunged for the emergency lock on the cradle, sealing the seed inside, but even as she did, the door to the lab hissed open. 3 figures entered, clad in matte black armor. No insignia, no names, only mirrored visors reflecting her fear. They moved with military precision, weapons slung low, but ready. One stepped forward holding out a data tablet. Cooperate, and you walk away alive. Resist, and you vanish. Like your work. Nora forced her voice steady. You don't understand what it is. It's not a weapon. It's a witness. You'll twist it into something it was never meant to be. The soldier tilted his head, voice clipped. Meaning is irrelevant. Utility is all that matters. Before she could reply, a blaring alarm shattered. The moment. Dr. Imani had triggered the emergency failsafe from the observation bay. Red lights flared, sealing doors, releasing plumes of inert gas meant to confuse intruders. Chaos erupted. The soldiers barked orders, weapons raised. Nora ducked. Behind a console as rounds of electric pulses cracked against glass. She scrambled, heart pounding, toward the secondary containment locker. Imani's voice came through the intercom, frantic. Nora! Get the seed out! Go! Nora hesitated. Every instinct screamed to protect the archive, to guard its fragile data. But she saw Imani's figure on the security feed, cornered as soldiers advanced. Her chest tightened. Kael-Horem's face flashed in her mind. His sacrifices, his losses. History was repeating. The weight of it crushed her. She sprinted to the cradle, entering override codes with trembling hands. The seed's casing unlocked with a sharp hiss, its glow flooding the chamber. She wrapped it in an insulated carrier just as the nearest soldier vaulted the console, weapon leveled at her. Imani threw herself into his path. The crack of a pulse round lit the chamber. Nora screamed, but there was no time. She clutched the seed to her chest and bolted through the emergency hatch as smoke and chaos filled the lab. The underground corridors stretched before her like veins of stone and steel. She ran blind, the seed's glow bleeding through the carrier, guiding her steps. Behind her, boots thundered, shouts echoed. Stop her! Secure the artifact! She tore through a side passage, breath ragged, lungs burning. For the first time in her life, she was not merely analyzing data. She was fleeing with history itself in her arms. And in that desperation, something within her shifted. She was no longer just a scientist. She was a guardian. At a junction, she slammed her palm against a control panel, forcing a bulkhead shut between her and the pursuing soldiers. Sparks rained as they tried to cut through. Nora leaned against the wall, chest heaving, seed warm, against her ribs. Her thoughts spiraled. She had lived her career under sterile glass, measured words, careful publications. But here, with danger clawing at her heels, she understood Kael-Horem's agony. Knowledge was never neutral. It carried weight and sometimes blood. The comm crackled once more, the same cold voice. Run as far as you like, Dr. Selwyn. We will find you. The seed was never yours to keep. Her hands tightened around the carrier. For a fleeting moment, she wanted to collapse, to surrender. But then she felt the subtle vibration inside, the seed's steady rhythm, like a second heartbeat. No, she whispered, fierce now. It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't even belong to me. It belongs to all of us. She pushed off. The wall, forcing her tired legs to move. Up the corridor, a hatch opened into the night air. Beyond lay the endless desert, silent, brutal, unyielding. Behind her, sparks shrieked as the bulkhead gave way. Nora sprinted forward, the seed pressed, close, the desert wind rushing to meet her. For the first time, she understood Kael-Horem not as a distant figure, but as a mirror. He too had been hunted. He too had carried hope in his hands while the world closed in, and like him, she would not stop. The desert night was a furnace. Dry. Wind stinging Nora's face as she stumbled out of the Luxara site and into the dunes. Behind her, sirens wailed faintly, swallowed by the vast emptiness. The seed pressed against her ribs inside the carrier, warm and insistent, as if it knew. Time was running out. Her comm crackled, static at first, then Imani's voice, faint and broken. "Nora, don't stop. Whatever happens, decode it. Finish what he began." Then silence. The line went dead. Nora clenched her jaw, forcing down grief. The desert stretched in every direction, a sea of shifting sand. She had no map, no escort. Only the seed and the data still locked within. She activated her field tablet, syncing directly with the stellar lattice core. The screen came alive with fragments, incomplete strings that had eluded her for days. But now, under duress, her focus sharpened. Her fingers flew across the interface, pulling open modules, bypassing security locks. The AI whispered through her earpiece. "Data partition remaining 38%. Warning, pursuit signals. Detected, I know," Nora hissed. "Keep running analysis. Prioritize correlation algorithms." She trudged up a dune, boots sinking deep into the sand, while lines of ancient genetic code scrolled across her screen. Her lungs burned, sweat soaking through her shirt, but she refused to stop. For every step forward in the desert, she took another step deeper into the seed's memory. Images formed from data, snapshots of Paratune Basin life 4,000 years ago, insects buzzing, wheat bending under sun, the faint echo of pathogens riding dust storms. It was as if the seed had carried the Nile's breath into eternity. She whispered to herself, "This isn't just biology. This is surveillance. Observation at planetary scale." Her legs trembled. She fell to her knees, sand cascading around her. Behind, faint dots of light crept over the horizon. Pursuers. The Te. Orion Directorate had deployed drones. They were closing fast. The AI spoke again. "Partition unlocked. Cross-reference suggests presence of navigational structures embedded in data." Nora blinked. Navigational, as in coordinates? Her fingers danced across the tablet. The more she pulled, the clearer the patterns became. This wasn't just an archive. It was a roadmap. And Kael-Horem, centuries before, had touched the same lattice, glimpsed the same threads, without knowing what they meant. The seed vibrated softly inside the carrier, almost alive. Nora pressed her hand to it, breath ragged. "I see it now. I see what you were waiting for." She pushed herself up, forcing her body forward. Each dune became a test of will, each gasp of air a reminder that she was no longer simply decoding for curiosity. She was decoding for survival, hers, and perhaps humanity's. Bullets of light streaked past her as a drone fired a warning round into the sand. She staggered, half falling, clutching the seed tighter, yet her tablet continued to process, unlocking. The final firewall. She thought of Kael-Horem, of how he had buried the seed to protect it, even when it cost him his freedom. And now here she was, running through the same desert, hunted by different masters, but bound to the same burden. Her voice cracked, whispering to the night, "We're the same, you and I, both carrying hope, while the world tries to tear it." "Away!" the tablet chimed. "Final partition unlocked, data fully accessible." Nora froze, chest heaving, eyes wide. The seed's glow intensified, bleeding through the carrier, casting her shadow long against the dunes. The archive was open, every secret, every purpose, ready to reveal itself. And just as the whine of drones closed in, Nora realized she had no choice. She would finish decoding, whether in the lab in the desert or in the dark, because the seed was not only survival, it was destiny. She lifted the tablet, the glow lighting her face, and whispered, "Show me everything." The desert wind howled, carrying with it the faint whir of drones still sweeping the horizon. But Nora no longer heard them. Her eyes locked on the tablet as the final partition unfolded. The data reorganized, lines of genetic code collapsing into fractal geometry, then into a shimmering lattice that rotated in 3 dimensions. Her breath caught. This wasn't a pathogen. It wasn't even a record of Earth's biosphere anymore. It was a map. Coordinates burned across the display, repeating in elegant spirals. The AI spoke in a voice hushed, almost reverent. Decoded output indicates stellar positioning. Reference point, Captain's star. Distance, 12.8 light-years. Nora's pulse thundered in her ears. She zoomed in, watching as the lattice pulsed, with rhythmic intervals, like a heartbeat, like a beacon. The seed had not only observed life on Earth, it had been waiting for someone to unlock the key to finish the chain of communication. Her voice trembled. It's not just memory, it's a call home. The seed vibrated in her hands, a low hum rising through the carrier. The glow spilled across the sand, brighter than moonlight, casting long shadows of dunes and broken stone. The pulses quickened, forming patterns she recognized, binary bursts directed outward, ready to transmit. And in that moment, the weight of Kael-Horem's sacrifice struck her anew. He had buried the seed to protect it from men who sought power. She had uncovered it in a time when the same hunger threatened again. But the truth had outlasted them both. Nora pressed her hand to the crystal's surface, her whisper carried away by the wind. You wanted someone to answer. The lattice flared one final time, projecting a trajectory that reached past Earth, past the stars, past the void, straight to Captain's star. Behind her, the hum of the drones grew louder. Voices shouted through comms, weapons arming, but Nora did not move. She stood firm in the desert night, lit by the glow of the seed, staring into a future that had just opened, one where humanity was no longer alone, no longer unwatched. And then, with a sudden surge, the seed began to transmit. Luxara sight, Earth, dust of the desert clinging to steel and glass, while Captain's star glimmers unseen, 12.8 light-years away. Dr. Nora Selwyn sat alone in the observation chamber. The seed rested in its carrier before her, faint pulses illuminating the walls like the breath of something alive. Hours had passed since it had transmitted across the void. The world outside did not yet know, but 2 messages already waited. On her terminal, one from the Global Bio Consortium, the other stamped with the emblem of the Orion Directorate. Her reflection in the screen looked nothing like the woman she had been weeks ago. Hair tangled, eyes shadowed, but sharper now, less detached. She wasn't staring at data anymore. She was staring at a choice. The GBC's words were polished, clinical. Dr. Selwyn, contain the archive. We will allocate exclusive oversight, ensuring its security for the advancement of regulated science. Do not attempt independent release. Beneath the civility, Nora could hear the truth. Control, monopoly, reputation safeguarded by secrecy. Orion's message was darker, a flat voice masked by encryption. Deliver the seed. Humanity cannot be trusted with such knowledge. We will harness it for stability. She imagined their stability. Armies with bio-coded plagues, governments silenced with threats. Her hands trembled above the keyboard. If she obeyed either faction, the seed would vanish behind locked doors. If she defied them, she would be branded a traitor to science, maybe even a criminal. She thought of her career, the years sacrificed to sterile halls and unyielding protocols. She thought of the friends already lost, Imani's voice still echoing, "Don't stop, finish what he began." And in her mind, another face rose, Kael-Horem, the healer who had chosen exile over silence, who buried the seed not for glory but for hope. His path had ended in chains, but he had never bent to those who would twist knowledge for power. Nora exhaled slowly, eyes blurring. She realized this was not only her decision, it was theirs, his and hers. Two lives bound across centuries by a crystal that remembered everything. She whispered into the quiet, "If I stay silent, it dies. If I give it away, it becomes a weapon. But if I let the world see, then at least it breathes." The seed pulsed, once, as though answering. Nora closed her eyes. She knew what she had to do. The stellar lattice core flickered as Nora scrolled deeper into the unlocked partitions. For hours, she had believed the seed was only a recorder of genomes and ecosystems. But hidden beneath the strands of data, encrypted inside the crystalline veins, she found something different, something human. The screen unfolded a sequence of symbols, then reassembled them into images, faint holographic echoes encoded in light. At first grainy and indistinct, then sharper, a chamber of mud brick walls, torchlight trembling on rough stone. And at the center, him, Kael-Horem. Nora's breath caught. He was older than she had imagined, his shoulders stooped, his face worn from years of toil. Yet his eyes burned bright. She watched as he pressed his hands against the seed, whispering words the AI translated softly in her ear. "To those who come after, I could not save them all." The Council of Aten feared what they did not understand. They called it sorcery, and they silenced me. But I leave this not for them. I leave it for you. The image shimmered. His voice broke with pain. Behind him, guards' shadows stretched. Across the wall, he glanced back once, then leaned close, as if speaking directly to her. "Knowledge is a burden. It will test you. Others will seek to bind it, to twist it. But you must choose, whether to hide it or to let it live. My hope is that you will be braver than I was." Nora's chest tightened. She felt the weight of centuries collapse into this moment. The healer had carried the seed through fire and betrayal. Now his last words bled through the lattice, surviving beyond tombs and dynasties, waiting for her. Her hands trembled against the console. This wasn't just data. It was a testament, a farewell. A hand extended across time. She whispered back, voice raw. "I hear you. I won't let it die." The hologram dimmed, the last glimpse of Kael-Horem fading into darkness. But his words lingered, echoing inside her as steady as the seed's pulse. The desert dawn spilled pale gold over Luxara's site, but inside the lab the air was thick with silence. Dr. Nora Selwyn sat before her console, the stellar lattice core glowing faintly beside her. Kael-Horem's words still rang in her ears. His warning, his hope, two choices, hide it or let it live. She stared at the screen filled with data. Thousands of hours of simulations, genetic records, planetary surveys, and the final lattice pointing across the stars to Captain's star. Everything she had fought for, everything Kael-Horem had suffered for, was here. The comm unit blinked red. A message from the Global Bio Consortium, another from the Orion Directorate. Their tones different, but their intent identical: control, to lock the seed into vaults and turn it into leverage. Nora rubbed her temples, exhaustion heavy, but her mind was sharp with clarity. For most of her life, she had been careful, obedient to protocols, protective of her reputation, unwilling to take risks. Knowledge had been her fortress. Now it had become her battlefield. She whispered, "If I don't share it, it dies again. And I can't let it die." Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. One keystroke, and the archive could be released across open networks, mirrored, copied. Impossible to erase. One keystroke, and her career would be over, her safety gone. The AI spoke in its calm monotone. Warning, distribution will breach confidentiality agreements. Probability of termination of employment, 99%. Probability of political retaliation, high. Nora laughed bitterly. You think I don't know that? For a moment, she faltered. She thought of her colleagues at the GBC, of Imani's sacrifice, of the weight of standing utterly alone. Then she remembered Kael-Horem's hologram, his chained hands, his unbowed voice. My hope is that you will be braver than I was. Her hesitation burned away. She straightened in her chair, jaw set. Run the upload. Confirm, confirm. The console lit with a cascade of green. Firewalls fell, encrypted locks dissolved. The seed's data surged through satellites and fiber lines, spreading across servers from Cairo to New York, from research collectives to public forums. Within minutes, it was beyond recall. An open archive for all humanity. An alert pinged. The GBC demanded immediate suspension. Orion's signal broke through next, the same cold voice as before. You've doomed yourself, Dr. Selwyn. You think chaos is truth? You will regret this. She muted them. For once, their threats no longer mattered. The AI chimed again. Upload complete. Global access confirmed. Nora exhaled, trembling. But her eyes were steady. She had crossed the threshold. There was no going back. Outside the lab, voices rose as journalists, scientists, and citizens around the world began to receive fragments of the archive. Screens lit with images of ancient pathogens, holographic reconstructions of the Paratune Basin, and the unmistakable star map pointing toward Captain's star. The first wave of reactions came instantly. Shock, disbelief, outrage. Governments scrambled, institutions panicked. But beneath it all, a current of wonder rippled outward. Humanity had just been handed proof, living, undeniable, that they were not alone, and that across the gulf of stars someone had once cared enough to send a seed. Nora leaned back, exhausted, her pulse pounding. She felt strangely calm, as if a weight had lifted. For so long, she had been afraid of losing her place, her standing, her career. Now she realized none of that mattered. What mattered was truth, and truth was no longer hers to keep. She whispered, voice rough but firm. It belongs to everyone now. The seed pulsed in its cradle, brighter than ever, as if acknowledging her choice. And Nora knew, whatever storm awaited her, she had chosen the path Kael-Horem could not. She had let the seed live. Screens lit up across the globe. In lecture halls, in crowded cafes, in war rooms buried beneath capital cities, everyone saw it. The archive of the Imhotep's seed poured across the networks, unstoppable, mirrored on thousands of servers. At first came disbelief. Newscasters fumbled through breaking reports. Unverified data appears to show non-terrestrial technology. Governments rushed to shut the feeds down, but it was too late. Students dissected the code. Independent labs began replicating Nora's results. The truth was everywhere at once. In Cairo, a scholar whispered through tears at the reconstructed images of the Paratune Basin. He was real. Kael-Horem was real. In Geneva, the GBC's emergency boardroom fell into chaos, voices shouting over each other, some furious at Nora's betrayal, others shaken by the implications. And in the secure chambers of the Orion Directorate, generals stared at the star map pointing to Captain's star, 12.8 light-years from Earth. Their silence, heavier than threats. But outside institutions, ordinary people reacted differently. Crowds gathered in city squares, watching the lattice projections that artists and coders had pulled from the data. Children pointed at the glowing star map, asking questions no one could yet answer. For the first time in generations, humanity was united not by fear of war or disaster, but by awe, raw, trembling awe that someone out there had once looked back at them. Nora watched from her secured terminal, the world's pulse racing faster than her own. She had expected anger. She had expected condemnation. What she had not expected was this: the collective intake of breath, billions of lives pausing together to glimpse their place in a larger story. Her phone buzzed, threats, accusations, offers. She silenced them all. The seeds glow on her desk was answer enough. For the first time, she felt Kael-Horem's presence not as a distant echo, but as part of the chorus. His sacrifice, her choice. They were ripples in the same tide now breaking across the earth. The world trembled. But it was awake. Night returned to the desert. Nora stood on the ridge above Luxera site, the wind carrying sand across her boots. In the east, the stars shimmered like scattered fire. And there, faint but steady, Captain's star glowed, a pale ember across the gulf of 12.8 light years. She held the seed in her hands, its pulse softer now as though resting after its long vigil. Through its glow she remembered Kael-Horem, the healer who defied kings, who chose sacrifice over silence. His final words lingered in her mind. Be braver than I was. For the first time, she understood what he had given her. Not just data, not just proof, but a mirror. A reminder that courage was not measured by victories, but by the seeds planted, for those yet to come. The world was in turmoil. Governments would fight, factions would grasp, fear would rise. But the truth was free, and truth could not be chained again. Nora whispered into the desert night, "We did it. Together." The seed's glow brightened once, then dimmed, as if in answer. 2 lives, 2 choices, 1 thread of hope carried across centuries. And now, the future was listening, and so ends the journey of Imhotep's seed, a story of 2 lives separated by millennia, yet bound by 1 choice. Kael-Horem, the healer of Paratun Basin, and Dr. Nora Selwyn, the scientist of our time, both proved that knowledge is not just power. It is responsibility. Their courage reminds us that the future is not written by kings or councils, but by those willing to choose truth no matter the cost. If this story moved you, if it made you think about where we've come from and where we might be going, don't keep it to yourself. If this story moved you, like this video. Share it with friends who love science and storytelling. And subscribe so you don't miss the next journey across time and stars.